So now let's continue. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to start from margin. We're going to talk about margin. We're going to talk about padding. I know all this stuff we have talked about them in HTML. So I just want to go deep into it and how you can write it more, so how you can use it. So now let's start from let me see. Let me bring my W2 at the side. So let me bring it closer. Minimize this. So now what we're going to deal with is margin. So I'm going to bring in, instead of here, I'm going to bring in a div. So when I bring that div, h1, my heading, and then I'm going to bring in a p tag. So use lorem to generate text with my cursor. So when I copy part, I go and paste it here, Ctrl V, paste it. So this is what I have. So let's come to this, because what we're going to be doing is more of styling. So let's start from so now let's start from the div. So style, style. So I'm going to call to the what I'm going to do is, now I always advise you, since you are dealing with CSS, you are in the CSS mode part, try not, whenever you're starting your website, don't be using the div name, the element name to style it. Give it a class name and use that class name. Is always better. So because you may find yourself, after you have styled this div, now you may want to use the same div again in another place, then you find out that the style that is already in this first div will be affecting the new div. So in order to prevent that, you need to do what? Always give it a class name. So let me give this div here a class name. So given the class name, I can call it A. So when I come up here, so I'll say dot A, curly braces. I'm going to give it a width of 300 px, a height off your mic. Okay, off your mic. So all right, so I'm going to give it a width of a height of 300 px. So this is what I have, and I'm also going to give it a background color. So give it a background color of any color, just pick any color you want. This is what I have. Now margin, normally margin, when you come in and you write your margin, margin meaning that you are trying to put space outside of an element. So that's what it means, space outside of an element. But you can also put, now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to inspect this element so you see what will be happening. So when I inspect it, let me move this thing from screen. So yours, if you try to inspect it, it will not just appear like my own. So it will just appear like this. So but if it appears like that, you know what is causing this is this device mode. So you're trying to, if I click on that device mode, you try to put it in the device this thing mode. So I'm going to remove it from device mode, make sure that it's not in device mode, then I'm going to bring it down. So but one thing I'm going to do is that I will be clicking on this. This will help me touch my element. When I click on this, I will touch my element and I can be able to see the full width or whatever property I'm applying to that my element. So now then, all right, now let me do this one more time, so in case it's hard for you. So all I did here is right click on the inspect. So it's supposed to, yours is supposed to just appear like this. Some of your own may appear at the side of the screen. Let me show you. Some of your own may just appear like this, in case your own appear like this. Some of your own may appear like this, it doesn't matter. So if you want to change it, just come to this place where you have your more option. Choose how it's going to be. So I'm going to bring it like this. First one. So I love my own being like this. If you want to leave it in the other side, at the side, your choice. So let's go continue. So now let's give this thing a margin. So when I come here, I give it a margin of, let's say I give it a margin of 45px. This 45px that I give it now, watch where it's going to be. When I refresh, all I just did now, because of it is just one value inside of the margin, this space is all around it. It's at the top, it's at the right, it's at the left, it's at the bottom. When I touch this mouse now to touch this element, you will see it. So you can see this orange looking part. So this orange looking part, you can see that is the margin, and this margin is also part of this element. So this also leads you to one of the popular things that people don't really understand. Whenever you give your element a margin, that like you're trying to shift it and you're using margin to shift it, what you are doing there is that you are extending that element. You are not actually shifting it. You are increasing this element. Like now, let's say you give this a margin left here. What you're doing here is that you're adding more space, more space in this part. There is no element that will come, like now at this one that I just did now. There is no element that was going to come, and there's no element that will even come close to this purple part. So no element will come close to it. Any element that I put here will start from somewhere at this point here, where the margin stopped. So just note that whenever you're adding margin, what you're doing is that you're extending, instead of moving the element, you are actually extending the space, the element itself. So you are extending an invisible part of that element. That's what the margin does. So now we are going to also talk about position as we continue. I'm going to talk about position in a way that you can be able to move elements around and it will not extend it like the margin. So now also I also clarify, the margin is always good. It's always good to always use the margin. Whenever you're styling, try to use the margin. Is good. The fact that it extends the element does not make it bad. So now let's continue. So now that I've put one single value, this one single value belongs to all sides of this element. Now, but I can add a second value. So you can come here, you add the second value. So let me give it 78px. So what I just did now is that this first value that is in this margin will now become for the top and the bottom, and this 78 will now be for the left and the right. Let me refresh. So refresh. So when I refresh, as I touch the element, you can see that the left and right is bigger than the top and bottom. So now if I add another value again, let's say I add another value, let me say I add 1 px. So what this 1px means is that the top, now what I just did now is that I have made the top, the space at the top to be 45, left and right is now 78, and the bottom of this element will be 1. So this is it. When I refresh, so this is it here. So you can see the element now, this side here is 1 now, while the top remains 45, left and right is 78. So 78, this is it. So you see that there's no yellow part at the bottom. Now let's add one more, which is the last one we can add in this place. So let me use 123 px. So 123 px. So now what I just did now is that the top is now 45, the right is now 78, the bottom is 1, and the left is 123 px. This is it. So 123 at the left. From how you check it is from the top. You start from the top and go clockwise. So from the top is 45. The right is 78, bottom 1, and the left 123. So sometimes you can just come, because of, you know that the 4 now represent all side. Most time whenever you want to style your element, you can just still come here and just do 000. So you can say 0000. You already know that all this 0 will represent all side of this element. Then you can now start pushing. You already know that this is for the top, this is for the right, this is for the bottom, and the last one is for the left. So as you add value, it will just reflect at that particular part. So now just as we have for the margin, we also have for the padding. So margin is space outside of an element, and padding is space inside of that element. So now let's try to add for the, let's put the padding now. So give this padding. So just the same thing, I'm going to go the same way. 23 px, this 23 is inside, all around it, inside of this element. When I refresh, but it here inside of the element, you can see you can see the way this part here, this is the padding. So now that inside, each side now is now 23. So if I add a second value, so what it means now is that the top and bottom becomes 23, the left and right becomes 65. Let me extend my screen. So the left and right becomes 65. If you can see it, if you add another value again, let's add, let me keep adding more value. So when I do this, when I refresh, you see that the thing just extend from the left, from the bottom. So now what it is now is that the top is 23, left and right 65, bottom 79. If you add another value again, let me use 23 px. So now you have now put for all sides. So what you have here now is the left, the top 23, the right 65, the bottom 79, and the left 233. So this is for the all side. So now, so same thing goes to border radius. Same thing goes to border radius whenever you're doing border radius, and we use this border radius whenever you're trying to so whenever you're trying to style your element, you want to make, you can use the border radius to turn your box into different shape. So you can use the box to convert it to any kind of shape that you want. So I can come here now, we can just say border radius. If I put 45 px, it will be for all around it. So all around it now is curved. So now take note, this is the top, this part here where the M is the top, this is the right, and this is the bottom, and this part here is the left. So when I come and add the second value here, so let's say add the second value of 48 px. So what I just did now is this top here and this bottom remains 45, left and right remains, will now become 78. So if you add another value again, so if I add another value again, let's say 0 px. Anyway, whenever you're putting 0, you don't really need to put px in it. So 0 don't necessarily need the unit. So now what it just means is that the top remain 45, left and right 78, and the bottom 0. You can see 0. So I can add the last value, which you can add in any of it. So this time I'm going to use percentage 50%. So you can use percentage, you can use px, your choice, whichever shape you're trying to get. So you always know that percentage will always make it form a circle. So now when I refresh, So now what I just did now is the top 45, your right 78, the bottom 0, and this part 50%. So now let me comment on this and bring back this my border. So I'm bring back the border. So now let me comment on, alright, I refresh. Now I'm going to duplicate this element. So I'm going to duplicate this element, bring it down. This one here will be B. So now when I come up here also, I'm going to duplicate this also, and this one will be class B. Let me change the color of this one to something different. Use this. When I refresh, now look at what I have here now. So look at what I have here now. Let me remove this. Let me close this inspect. So this is what I have. So now if you look at this here, you can see that all these things shows different side of this element. So this one here, I can just change it to 144. Let me just do it like this. So if you look at these two elements, the div here and the bottom, they are closer to each other. So this div at the bottom of at the top of this, at the bottom of the purple one, you can see that we have one px there, and at the top of the cadet blue, we have the 125 px there. So meaning that two margin are coming together. Now let me increase the number here. So when I refresh, so the last one is 11, the bottom of the purple, the first one is 11, and the top of the second one is 125. So now logically, if you try to do the calculation between the space between these two elements, you say that the space between these is what? Because this top here, which is at the top here, is 125, and the bottom here is 11. You start doing a calculation saying the total space between this part and this part here is 125 plus 11, which will give you 136. So that's the logical way of calculating it. But the truth is that that's not exactly what is here. So the space between these two elements now is only 125. Only 125. So what happens is that whenever you have two elements comes together, when they are closer to each other, the bigger margin always collapses the smaller one. The bigger one will always collapse the smaller one. If I inspect it again, you will notice something here. You will notice something when I touch it. Let me touch the element. So when I touch this one here, you see what happened. You see where it stops. You can see where the yellow stop. It doesn't make sense that it does not reach this particular purple, this second one. So you can see where the yellow stop. But now let's touch this other one. You can see where it stopped. Because of this second one is has the bigger margin. You see that it reaches the purple one, and it's the one that is above the shot. Is the one that runs the show there. So it's the space between the first one and the smaller one. So just note that whenever two element comes together, the ones with the bigger margin will always collapse the smaller margin. So now why I'm showing you all these things is that if you notice something from what we're doing here, is that as you style this element, this is what it initially was, this purple part, but then you start adding padding. So when you add padding, you notice something, this element just increased. You add, even when you add border, even when you try to add border also increase that element. So border just increase the element. The 3 solid black. And I refresh. Let me expand this before refreshing it. So you see how big this element is. Now whenever you have there's what we call box model. So box model states that whenever states that the content, the padding, the border, and the margin all add up to increase the height and width of a particular element. And this thing here is very very important to know whenever you are styling layout. The padding, the border, the content itself, the text, the margin that you put there all add up to increase this element. If I remove the margin, you will notice that this thing will return to what it was before, very small. You can look at this one here. Okay, I've when I click here and touch, you can see that this part here is actually the initial width. So the initial width of this element was this. Now, okay, now let's do this in a normal way, in a way that we will do the calculation. So I'm going to comment on only this. Okay, let me bring them one by one. I refresh. There is no margin, there is no padding. Now if I add more text here, this height of this thing, which is 300, if I add more text, you will notice that I will have to do what, adjust the value there in order to accommodate the text to add there, meaning that the content, which is the text there, always add up to do what, increase the height of this particular element. That is the first one. Now let's add border. Let me bring back the border. Now look at the width of this. Now let's calculate the width alone for now. Looking at the width here is 300, but the moment you add the border of, look at the border I have here, 23 px. That is the thickness of the border, 23 px. What I now have now is the left. What I now have now is 300, which is the width, plus 23 times 2. Now why is it times 2? This side here, because we are dealing on the with the width, this side alone is just 23. This border, this side alone is 23, and this side alone is also 23. So 23 plus 23 gives you 46, plus the 300, so you have 346. So the true width of this box now is 346. Now let's say you come and add another margin again. Let's say you add a margin of 50 px. When I refresh, like I said, margin is also part of this element. Even though you are not seeing it here, it's also part of the element, meaning that if you try to put another element, they will never try to reach this part where the margin stops. So now if you try to calculate the width, the actual width of this element, now what you have here is what, your 300 for the width, plus what, this one times 2, which is 46. So you have your 346 plus 50 times 2, because the margin is added all around it, meaning that there is margin here, there is a margin of 50 px here. So it will be now what, 446. So 446 for the width alone, just because of we added the margin. So now let's say you add padding. Let me also give it 50 px. So what it is now is also again the 446 that you have already calculated before, the 446 plus what, another 50 times 2, which will give you what, 546. So meaning that this width that was initially 300 have grown to what, 556, all because of you added what, margin, you added what, padding, and you also added the border. So now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to there's a project I'm going to give you guys to do, so I'm going to send it later on, so you guys are going to attempt the project. So but okay, let me bring in the project. So I'll show you one part in that project that so now the part, let me find the project. Alright, somewhere here. Alright, so this is a project. There are all 5 of them. So among this project here, now this particular product landing page, when you click on it, click on this and click on this, so it will take you to this page. Now if you look at this page, if I scroll down, you see 3 boxes aligned horizontally. So how do you arrange this box horizontally? How do you create this? So we're going to do this now. So how you can be able to arrange box like this. So now, so what I'm going to do is I'm still going to use this, but let me comment on this second div, and I will comment on everything here. So comment on this also. Alright, I'm going to use this style instead. So of commenting on it, I'm going to use this style. So let me wipe everything here, leaving just margin. So remove everything. So when I refresh, this is what I have. So now let me do it. So since that one is 3 boxes, I'm going to duplicate this box to be 3. Now if you notice something, that they all have the same class name. So whenever you want to arrange box horizontally, make sure they have the same class name. So now I have what? 3 boxes that I want to arrange horizontally. So now let's come back here. So now only note that I've already given it only height, width, and the background color. Now the next thing I'm going to do here is, whenever you want to arrange a box horizontally, you make sure you do your calculation right, because you're going to do calculation. So to do calculation, I don't really know how to use px in this calculation. I'm going to use percentage, and it's very, very good whenever you're dealing with layout. And px is not good for boxes whenever you're creating a layout. So in this situation, percentage is good because percentage is always flexible. The px is always fixed. So now let's calculate it. So now in this space, your space is always 100%. This space that I'm trying to put it, whatever space you're trying to put it, is always 100%. So now what you do is that you have 3 boxes and you want to fill it in a space, which that space is always 100%. What you're going to do is that you're going to get the actual width for each boxes is going to be 100 divided by the number of that boxes. So now these boxes we have is just 3. So 100 divided by these boxes, you are going to get 33.33%. Now meaning that if I want to give this width, I'm going to put 33.33%. When I refresh, so this is the actual width that can fit this box horizontally. This is the main width that can fit it horizontally. So now let's continue. Now the next property that we can use to arrange it horizontally is what we call float. We call it float. So float. So now this float accepts two main value. You can float it to the left, you can also float it right, whichever one that you want. So I'm going to float it left for now. So when I refresh, you can see the boxes have already arranged horizontally. So now that you have arranged horizontally, the next thing I'm going to do is, now I need to separate it. I need to put that margin to demarcate it. Now whenever you are dealing with something like this, always try to use since you have already started with percentage, in order to be accurate with your calculation, always continue with that percentage until you reach where you cannot use percentage any longer. So now let me use for the margin accepts percentage very well, so I'm going to continue with margin. So I'm going to give it a margin of 2%. Now remember that this 2% I'm just doing now is applied to both left and right of this of each of these elements of this box. So the 2% is applied to the left and right, in short all around it, because that's exactly what we have here, all around it. So of each box. When I refresh, now you see why what you see that the boxes are fell down. Now the reason why this last one fell down is because we have already added more value. Now remember that all we needed for these boxes to arrange is to arrange horizontally is just 33.33%. That's all we needed. But now that you have added the 2%, so it is now what 33.33 33.33 percent plus 2 times 2, which will give you that's 2 times 2. You get your 4 plus your 33. You are going to get 37, which will not fit in here. That's why this last box fell down. So what do? You minus this value here, this margin, from what? Your width. So you minus this value from your width. So if you minus 4, which is the 2 times 2, which you minus the 4 from here, you're going to get what? 29. When I refresh, the boxes will come back. Now let's say again we want to add margin padding this time around. Let's give it a padding. So you say you want to add it a padding of, let me use 1.5%. When I refresh, the box also falls because it just did the same thing. 1.5 times 2 is 3 plus your existing calculation here is going to give you 3 plus 33.3 is going to give you 36.33. So we need to minus what? 3 from what? So we are going to minus the 3 from the width again. So if you minus 3 from the width, you're going to get 26. So you're going to get 26. When I refresh, this is it. The boxes are back, and the thing is that it's going to be very responsive. Now even though that we are not going to, what we're going to do as we progress, I'm going to show you how to style boxes in different screen sizes, because we're going to do that. So meaning that these boxes that we are styling right now, it's no good to leave it like this, like especially this particular one that is 3. When we go to smaller screen, we will need it to be just a single box arranged vertically. We want the box to be arranged vertically, which is best, so that your viewers will see it very very well. So see the text, and you notice that this one is overflowing from the box. So now let me expand it again. Now let's minus from this. Let's also add border. So now the thing I remember is that border does not accept percentage. That's one thing I noticed. Border does not accept percentage. So if you try percentage in border and it does not work, you are going to be stuck using your px. So I'm going to put px here, 4px. So when you do that, you already know that what you just did now is this. So I need to complete it. Solid. Let me use red. So refresh. Each boxes have that 4px. So what we have here now is now going to be added. We just added 8px because it's times 2, left and right, that's times 2. 8px to do already what? 33.33%. So now how do we do it now? Because I don't really know the conversion of px to percentage. So but there is a very easy way to do it. So the very easy way to do this, to do the calculation here, is what we have all called calculate. There's a property called calculate in your CSS. So instead of, now remember, we're going to minus, what we want to do now is that we want to minus this 8 times 2, this 4 times 2, which is 8. We want to minus it from this percentage. So to minus it, we're going to use that calculate. So I'm going to, let me cut this, so remember what it is. Cut it. Now I'm going to use this property called calculate. So I'm going to paste that value there inside. So this is it. So now this property I'm adding here now, this thing here, it will help us to minus px from this percentage. So when you do it, I can now do what? Say minus that px, which is what, 8 px. So when I do it, when I refresh, the boxes are back, and it's still going to be responsive. It's still going to be responsive. You can just comment on the height, so that it will just, for most time we don't, to just leave the height so that it will just flow on its own. So become very, very responsive. So with this now, you see, this is how you arrange your box horizontally. Now, apart from this pattern, there is other, apart from the float that I use in arranging this box horizontally, there is what we call flexbox, which we are going to talk about later on. So we also use it to arrange boxes also. So now float is very, very good to arrange your box, but it has a downside. The downside of this float is that, now let's say for some reason that you were doing your calculation, you did not do it right, and you just went ahead and put any value, but that value end up creating what, space at the side here. Now you notice something. If I have another element that is following this, if there was an element that was following this, let's say h4 that was following it, let me use lorem, that was following this element. Remember, I'm not floating, I've not even done anything to the h4. I just added it here. When I refresh, you see what it just did. The h4 just jumped and instead of floating with the boxes, and I don't really like this. So in order to prevent this, we have what we call the clear property. So now how we do it is that whenever you are floating a box, like in this situation we are floating this a tag, make sure you go to the next element, the next element that follows what, the boxes that you are floating, which in my situation here is the h4. So go to that element, call it. So when you call it here, h4 curly braces, we will use what we call the clear property. So we have the clear. Now this clear accepts three values. We have the left, the right, and the both. Now when do we use left or right? So whenever you are floating something from the left, you clear it from the left. If you are floating it from the right, you clear it from the right. But if there is any situation where probably you have written a lot of code and you can't even figure out where you are floating it from, you can just come here and say clear both. So when I refresh now, you will notice that the text will now go low, and there is no how this text will now try to fill up this space. So let me bring back the 6 that I removed from this part, so the boxes will come back. So this is the calculation. So this is how you float boxes. So whenever you are trying to deal with boxes, always remember one, that your margin, the padding, the border add up to increase that boxes, and you can use a float to arrange the boxes horizontally, and also make sure to prevent other elements from doing what, floating with it, by doing what, calling the next element that is following the boxes that you are floating, and doing what, applying the clear property there. So is there any question? Any question? Alright, so I believe there's no question. So I'm going to paste this for you guys. So see you in our next lecture. So I'm also going to send a link to the video later on, so in case if there's anything you miss, you can still go through the video. So see you in our next class.